You are now tuning into Anomaly in the Veil. This evening, we return to Kess and their adventure in the Between. Come, join us as we see what dangers Kess finds themselves in on the Between. Part 3, The Eternal Carnival, Second Act. The spotlight, which had no visible source, swiveled to illuminate the first ring. The clowns assembled there with disturbing coordination, their elongated forms arranging themselves in a semicircle. The center of the ring remained empty, waiting. "For you," Danny whispered, his transparent form hovering at Kess's shoulder. "Walk to the center, stand tall. No matter what happens, no matter what they do, keep your face neutral. Don't smile, don't laugh, don't even smirk." Kess stepped forward, boots crunching on the packed dirt. Each step felt like wading through water, resistance building with distance. The ghostly audience's applause swelled, then faded to expectant silence. Standing in the center of the ring, Kess could see the clowns more clearly. Their painted faces weren't just cracked. The cracks moved, spreading and healing, creating patterns that drew the eye and held it. Their costumes were patchwork affairs, bright colors stitched together with thread that looked disturbingly like human hair. The tallest clown stepped forward, its movements fluid despite its distorted proportions. It produced a red balloon from nowhere, inflated it with a breath that sounded like wind through a graveyard, and began twisting it into shapes. First, a dog. Then the dog became a giraffe. Then the giraffe became something that had too many heads and legs that bent backward. The clown presented it to Kess with exaggerated flourish. The other clowns watched, their black mirror eyes unblinking. "For you," the tall clown said, its chest voice resonant. "A token of our appreciation. A creature that has never existed and will never die." "Beautiful, yes?" Kess kept their face carefully neutral, accepting the balloon animal without expression. It felt wrong in their hand, too warm, pulsing slightly as if it had a heartbeat. "Tough crowd," another clown remarked. This one, with a face painted in a checkered pattern that hurt to look at directly. Perhaps a different approach. Something more classical. The clowns began their routine. It started simply, exaggerated pratfalls, one clown slipping on a banana peel that appeared beneath its foot, tumbling in a cartwheel of impossible flexibility, its body folding and unfolding like origami. The fall was perfectly timed, perfectly executed. In any normal circus, it would have been merely amusing. Kess felt their mouth twitch, suppressed it immediately. Danny's voice came from nowhere and everywhere. "Good. That's good. They're starting gentle. It gets worse." The clowns escalated. Two of them produced a ladder that was simultaneously too short and too long, depending on viewing angle. They attempted to paint a wall that didn't exist, getting covered in paint that changed colors mid-drip, creating surrealist patterns on their already bizarre forms. They performed a slapstick routine where each hit produced a sound completely wrong for the impact. A pie in the face sounded like a gong. A kick landed with a violin's sharp pluck. A punch created the sound of glass breaking backwards, shards reassembling. The timing was impeccable. Centuries of comedic tradition distilled into perfect physical humor, then twisted just enough to make it alien and unsettling. The juxtaposition of familiar comic beats with completely wrong context created a cognitive dissonance that the brain tried to resolve through laughter. Kess bit the inside of their cheek, hard enough to taste copper. The pain helped, focused them. The balloon animal in their hand pulsed faster, as if excited or anxious. "Oh my," the checkered clown said. tilting its head at an angle that would have snapped a human neck. Still so serious. Perhaps you don't appreciate physical comedy. Let us try something more sophisticated. The clowns arranged themselves in a tableau. They began to mime, movements exaggerated but precise, telling a story without words. It was the story of Kess's journey through the between. They portrayed the rest stop, one clown becoming the vending machine with mechanical precision. They showed the mall, creating the impression of endless corridors with just their hands and bodies. They depicted the movie theater, one clown lying flat to become rows of seats while another became the flickering screen. But they played it for comedy. The vending machine clown dispensed items from its mouth, gagging exaggeratedly. The mall corridors became a chase scene with Benny Hill timing. The movie theater scene was performed as silent film slapstick, complete with title cards held up by the smallest clown. It was Kess's trauma, their desperate search, their loss and fear and determination, repackaged as entertainment. Mocked, made absurd. No, Danny's voice urged. Don't give them that. They're trying to make you laugh at yourself, at your pain. If you laugh at what they're showing you, you accept their version of your story. You become theirs. Kess closed their eyes, focused on breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The balloon animal in their hand had gone still, deflated slightly. When they opened their eyes, the clowns had stopped their performance. They stood motionless, regarding Kess with those insectoid black eyes. But something had changed. The air grew colder. The calliope music slowed, deepened, became discordant and threatening. Remarkable restraint, the tall clown said slowly, but its chest voice had developed an edge, a metallic scraping quality. Most break by now, but we have one final performance for you, our masterpiece. The clown's painted smile began to crack further, fissures spreading like fault lines across porcelain. The other clowns moved closer, forming a tighter circle around Kess. Their movements lost the last vestiges of playfulness, becoming predatory, deliberate. One of them cracked its knuckles, each pop sounding like snapping bones. They're getting angry, Danny warned, his voice tense. I've seen this before. When the routine doesn't work, when someone resists, they get desperate. Hostile. They'll push harder now, much harder. The clowns began to remove their faces, not masks, their actual faces. They peeled away the cracked grease paint and skin beneath as if removing wet paper, revealing what lay underneath. And underneath was nothing. Pure void. Empty space that seemed to extend infinitely inward, containing the absence of stars, the lack of light, the negation of existence itself. But now the voids pulsed with malevolent energy. Red light flickered in their depths like distant fires, and from those voids came voices. Not the chest voices they'd been using, but other voices. Familiar voices twisted into cruel mockery. Kess's voice, high-pitched and whining. I'm so special, searching for someone who abandoned me. I'm so noble, sacrificing everything for nothing. Their mother's voice, disappointed. We raised you better than this. You're an embarrassment, a failure. The clowns began to advance, not dancing now, but stalking. Their elongated forms hunched forward, arms swinging low, fingers scraping the ground and leaving gouges in the packed dirt. You think you can resist? The tall clown snarled. You think you're strong enough? We've broken stronger travelers. We've shattered better souls. You're nothing. A fading echo pretending at substance. One clown lunged forward, its distended mouth opening impossibly wide, revealing not teeth but more void, deeper void, void that wanted to swallow and consume. It stopped inches from Kess's face, that empty maw close enough that Kess could feel the absence of warmth radiating from it. "Laugh," it commanded, voice multiple and grinding. "Laugh at yourself. Accept that you're ridiculous. Pathetic. A joke. Laugh." The other clowns joined in, all screaming now, their voids pulsing red and black, their forms beginning to distort further, becoming less humanoid and more abstract, collections of reaching limbs and gaping voids in pure malicious intent. Laugh, laugh, laugh. The word became a chant, a battering ram against Kess's psyche. The voices from the voids multiplied, overlapping into a cacophony. Every cruel thing Kess had ever thought about themselves, every insecurity, every moment of self-loathing, all amplified and projected back at maximum volume. You matter to no one. You've wasted your existence. Sarah was right to leave. Your search was pointless. You're dissolving and no one will notice. Kess felt their knees buckle, felt the laughter building not from humor but from hysteria, from the overwhelming need to break, to shatter, to let go and give them what they wanted just to make it stop. "No." Danny's voice cut through, sharp and clear. "Kess, listen to me. They're breaking their own rules. They're not performing anymore. They're attacking. That means you've already won. They've lost, and they know it." Kess latched onto that voice, that one clear point of certainty in the chaos, drew a ragged breath, planted their feet, and spoke, voice steady despite everything. "No." The clowns recoiled, their forms solidifying slightly, shocked. "No," Kess repeated, louder. "I don't accept your version. I don't laugh at your mockery. You don't get to rewrite my story. I lived it. I know what it means, and I say no." The tall clown's form flickered, wavered, then suddenly snapped back into its original distended shape. Its painted face reformed, but wrong now, the smile upside down, the colors inverted, black where white should be. "You," it hissed, "have broken the act." All the clowns solidified simultaneously, their forms now grotesque parodies of their original appearances, makeup smeared and dripping like tar, costumes torn and stained with substances that might have been blood or oil or something worse, bodies twitching with barely contained rage. The calliope music stopped completely, leaving only silence and the sound of their ragged breathing. "Then you have failed the first ring," the tall clown spat, "which means you don't get to pass, which means you stay." "Wait," Danny said, his translucent form flickering with alarm. "That's not how it works. They can't just change the rules." But they were. The rules were bending, breaking. The clowns had lost according to the original parameters, but they were rewriting everything in real time, refusing to accept defeat. The tall clown's head rotated completely around, neck twisting like a wrung towel. "If you won't join the performance voluntarily," it said from its backward-facing mouth, "then you'll join it by force." The clowns lunged as one, all pretense abandoned. No longer performers, but predators. Their elongated arms reached for Kess, fingers splitting into multiple digits, joints bending in too many directions. Kess pulled out the last flare, knowing it was dangerous, knowing it might make things worse, but having no other choice. "Danny, get clear!" Kess shouted. "Do it!" Danny yelled back. "Break this entire cursed place!" But this time, they didn't just release it. They held on, focused, channeled every bit of their remaining reality mass into the crystalline structure, making it burn brighter, hotter, more coherent than it was ever meant to. The light that exploded from the flare wasn't just white, it was every color and no color, baseline reality concentrated into a single point and expanding like a supernova. The clowns screamed, their forms coming apart not into fragments but into component lies. Every false thing they represented, every mockery and cruelty, dissolved under the onslaught of pure, uncompromising truth. The first ring began to crack, literally crack, fissures spreading through the packed dirt like shattered glass. The ground buckled and heaved, the entire tent shuddered. Canvas walls billowed violently. Support poles groaned and began to bend. Kess, Danny's voice. The whole structure is collapsing. We need to move. But the clowns weren't finished. Even as they dissolved, they reached out with those impossible arms, grasping, clawing. One managed to catch Kess's ankle, its grip ice-cold and crushing. "You'll stay with us," it gurgled through a throat that was coming apart. "Forever, forever, forever." Kess kicked hard, felt something crack beneath their boot, and the grip released. They scrambled backward as the clown finally dissolved completely, its void face winking out like a snuffed candle. The other clowns were suffering the same fate, but they fought it, resisting dissolution with everything they had. They crawled toward Kess even as their bodies came apart, leaving trails of black ichor and dissipating smoke. The first ring collapsed entirely, creating a void in the circus floor, a pit of absolute nothingness. The crumpled clowns were sucked toward it, their screams doppling into silence as they fell into whatever lay beyond the between. "Run!" Danny grabbed Kess's arm with his newly solid hand. "The second ring! We need to reach it before everything collapses." They ran together across the circus floor, dodging falling debris as tent poles began to topple. The ghostly audience was fleeing now, translucent figures dissipating like morning mist. The acrobats were waiting, and they were no longer graceful. Their sequined bodysuits had torn, revealing musculature that moved wrong, as if their bodies were machines, poorly mimicking human anatomy. Their faces, which had been neutral and professional, now showed expressions of pure hatred. "You destroyed our colleagues," one acrobat said, its voice like grinding metal. Its spine bent backward until it was looking at Kess upside down while its body remained forward-facing. "For that, you'll suffer. We'll make you fall forever." The 7 acrobats didn't perform. They attacked. They launched themselves at Kess simultaneously from impossible angles, creating their own gravitational fields not to disorient but to tear apart. Kess felt the pulls from multiple directions, each one trying to wrench them in a different vector. One acrobat grabbed Kess's arm. Its grip was impossibly strong, and where it touched, Kess felt their gravity nullify completely. They began to float, feet leaving the ground. Another acrobat seized their leg, pulling in the opposite direction. A third grabbed their shoulder. Each contact point became a new center of gravity, and Kess's body was being stretched between them like taffy. "Plant yourself," Danny shouted desperately. "Remember what down means." But Kess couldn't remember. With so many conflicting pulls, with their body being physically torn in multiple directions, the concept of down became meaningless. Their device fell from their pocket, tumbling away in some direction that wasn't any of the usual ones. Kess watched it spiral into a fold in space. "Stability critical," the device's voice said as it vanished. 0% imminent. "No!" Kess roared, and reached deep inside themselves, past the single-digit percentage that remained. They reached for the memory of weight, of substance, of being real. They remembered standing in their old house, making breakfast with Sarah. The simple weight of a coffee mug, the heaviness of morning. They remembered their first steps as a child, learning what it meant to fall and to catch yourself. They remembered 4 years of walking through the between, always returning to their feet no matter what. Kess wrenched their arm free from the first acrobat with a surge of desperate strength, planted their feet against nothing and pushed, made the nothing solid through sheer force of will and stubborn refusal to dissolve. Their boots touched ground that existed because they insisted it existed. The acrobats hissed in frustration, their coordinated attack broken. They regrouped, forming that living gyroscope again, but this time it was jagged, angry, rotating too fast, generating not just gravity but a grinding destructive force meant to pulverize. "They're going to crush you," Danny warned, backing away from the terrible centrifugal energy. "That's not performance anymore. That's murder." The gyroscope rolled toward Kess, 7 bodies interlocked and spinning, reality warping around them, the air itself screaming from the violence of their rotation. Kess stood firm, feet planted, weight distributed, every cell in their body screaming to run, but they refused. And as the gyroscope was about to impact, Kess jumped. Not up, not away, but down. Harder down than should be possible, compressing their own gravity, making themselves heavier, denser, more real than the surrounding space. They landed with an impact that cracked the ground, and the shockwave of pure gravitational assertion hit the gyroscope like a physical wall. The interlocked acrobats came apart violently, flung away from each other by their own momentum turned against them. They struck the tent walls, the ground, each other, and lay still, their bodies twisted at angles that would have killed baseline humans. The second ring flickered, sparked, and began to collapse just like the first. "2 rings down," Danny said, his voice awed and terrified. "But Kess, look." The third ring's spotlight ignited with nuclear intensity, but the Ringmaster wasn't alone anymore. Around him stood shadows, dark figures that might have been the circus's final defense, or might have been something worse, and the tent itself was coming alive. The canvas walls rippled with malevolent intent. The support poles twisted like living things. The very structure of the space was turning hostile. Danny nodded, his solid form giving Kess courage. "Together, then. I'm with you." They walked toward the third ring as the second collapsed behind them, each step an act of defiance. The Ringmaster stood waiting, his impossibly tall top hat touching the tent's peak. His coat of flayed leather writhed. His featureless mask somehow conveyed pure, focused malevolence. As Kess and Danny crossed into the third ring's boundary, the circus disappeared. But this time, it wasn't replaced with memories or fears. It was replaced with truth. Unfiltered, absolute truth. Kess saw themselves as they really were, barely 8% coherent, more ghost than person, held together by will alone. They saw Sarah in Oakville, genuinely happy, having mourned and moved on years ago. They saw the photograph in their pocket as just paper and ink, not a lifeline or a promise, but an artifact of a past that couldn't be reclaimed. They saw the between stretching infinitely, filled with other lost travelers, and understood that even among them, there was no guarantee of connection or community. Being lost together didn't mean being found. "This is what you fear most," the Ringmaster's grinding gears voice said. "You fear that nothing matters, that there's no deeper meaning, that your search was neither heroic nor tragic, just a thing you did that led you here, to this moment, barely existing, with no certainty waiting ahead." "Yes," Kess said quietly. The Ringmaster's mask tilted. "You accept this?" "I accept this. Even knowing it means you may dissolve completely, that you may never find community, never stabilize, never matter to anyone?" "Even knowing that," Kess said. "Because here's what you don't understand. It doesn't matter if it matters. I did it anyway. I'm still here anyway. and I'm going to walk out that door anyway, whether I'm 5% real or 0% real, because the alternative is standing still. And I don't stand still." The ringmaster was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he removed his mask. "This is what happens if you stay," the alternate Kess said. "If you let fear win. You become something that feeds on others' fears. Something that traps travelers because you couldn't complete your own journey. But you're different. You kept moving, so I'm letting you go." The ringmaster replaced the mask and raised his arms. The hostile shadows dissipated. The writhing tent grew still. "The show is concluded," he announced to the empty air. "Take your leave, and don't look back." A door materialized at the back of the tent, glowing with warm light. "Come on," Danny said urgently, "before it changes its mind." Kess grabbed Danny's hand. Together. Together. They ran for the door as the tent began its final collapse, the entire structure folding in on itself like a dying star. Behind them, they heard the ringmaster's voice one last time. "Thank you for showing me what I should have done." Kess and Danny burst through the door and tumbled into darkness. But not empty darkness. The gentle darkness of a starless night with the promise of dawn somewhere beyond. Danny stood solid and real beside them. "We made it," he breathed. Kess's device was somehow back in their pocket. It beeped. Stability, 11%. Rising slowly, 12%. "We made it," Kess agreed and smiled. Thank you for tuning in to The Between. Kess will return to face the lonely and winding ways of The Between in the next part. Stay safe and watch your step, because if you don't, you might find that the next door you walk through takes you somewhere unexpected.